Yeah. Welcome students to EPG Pathshala, module number 34, which is class in popular culture. I am Divya Kusum Ray. I teach English in National Institute of Technology, Silchar, Assam. I would be delivering this lecture in order to make you understand a few elements about popular culture and class. What is popular culture and what is class, and how these two are related. Make no mistake, these two things can be combined and can give you a very specific insight into one of the most important strands of studies in humanities in this modern world, called cultural studies. In order to delineate on this particular topic, popular culture and class, we will dissect the two parts. In one part, we will be talking about popular culture. What is popular culture? And how can it be read or observed from several other critical strands? Same will happen with class. What is class? What is class according to Marxist thoughts? What is class according to post-Marxist thoughts? What are the criticisms against each class and all that? Please remember, I will not be, in the short time, will not be able to give you a very cogent description of whatever I'm talking about, but I'll be giving you enough pointers, and if you take the help of the e-texts in letter, then you'll be having a far better idea. As for the name, popular culture and class, as you can clearly see, there are two items in it. One is popular culture, the other is class. The very first question that comes to our mind is, what is popular culture and what is class? And thirdly, and the most obviously, what is the relation between the two? Popular culture, the word, let's describe it or disseminate it at first. Popular, the word, comes from Latin, popularis, which means of the people. Culture, on the other hand, can be traced back into two separate words, one Latin, other German. One is colere, Latin, which means something to protect or something to honor. And for German, it's Kultur. Now, here is an important thing in here, which I think I should mention at the very outset. Kultur, the word in German, is a Enlightenment word, which is basically 18th to 19th century word, which means something that is civilized, something that is cultivated, something that is somehow intricately related in human development in post-developmental period. So, joining these two, what we have is popular and culture. Interestingly, there is also a slight bit of conundrum in here in order to understand how exactly to match these two words. The conundrum is pretty clear. See, popular is something meant for the mass. Culture, on the other hand, from its very outset, as you must have seen from Kultur and Colere, it's something not exactly for the mass, or rather, it is something to be high and mighty, something to be guarded, something to be revered. Now, I hope you can see the problem, or rather the problem of compatibility in here. How can something that is essentially described as mass appealing be also something that should be honored and guarded and all that? So whenever we are talking about honoring or guarding or something that is civilized and everything, that must mean that it is reserved for a certain section of the society. Now, if you are feeling funny about this, if you think this is a little bit of an impasse that we somehow have reached at the very beginning of our lecture, fret not, because this is also the whole argument that has shaped the history of popular culture for let's say for at least the past 100 years, ever since the conception of popular culture came in our mind. But before that, what we need to understand is, in a more cogent way, what are the problems of marrying or matching these two terms. The first is, what is popular? For example, what constitutes the popular to be popular? Numbers? Now, is there any culture in the entire universe that can claim ultimate number from the mass? Is there any cultural existence all over the world that actually can lay its claim to reach each and every person in the world? Isn't there a difference in taste based on the groups and the, let's say, and the taste groups, consumers and stuff? Point number one. Point number two is, popular at what time? Can any cultural element be eternal? Can any cultural element be transcending the barriers of time forever and remain as popular as it was at the time of its birth? Third, and this is very important, and this is what will happen, what will come to us in the later part of this lecture as well: high and low art. Now, just give me a second to go back on this. When we were talking about, remember the first conundrum that we talked about, that popular and culture. Culture, that is something supposed to be elitist. Popular, that is something to be for the mass. Now, mass and elite bringing together. So whenever you are saying elite, there must be, you are basically assuming the existence of something high and something low. In other words, something high art and something called low art, right? So the whole question of high and low art also comes resoundingly back in the whole domain of popular culture, specifically because whenever we think of popular culture, just think about popular culture right now in your mind. For example, Bollywood movies. Is it high or is it low? Is there a certain section of people? There is a certain section of people in the society who would be looking down at Bollywood films or any popular cultural elements as such and say that this is too below their taste. That is a common occurrence over the entire world, and there is a debate that never seems to be ending. So this whole definition with demarcation between high and low art is also extremely important when we are talking about popular culture as such. And third, the next point, actually, the next maybe more important point is the formula. Again, let us take recourse to the example of Bollywood movies. Popular culture, as we understand, is codified. It is something that follows a code. There must be a formula which actually says, an equation as such, which says that there should be a specific way a culture should be represented in order to make it popular. Now, not all cultures become popular even after following the formula. So again, the whole argument of taste is coming resoundingly back to us and asking us that, how about the audience? For one section of a particular audience, something might be popular, and for the other section of the same audience, that may not be popular. So such problems always come through when we are talking about popular culture and class. But we must, for that matter, look for something of a definition of popular culture that is something more coherent and less dependent on its inherent problems in order to understand what we are. See, I mean, that is the thing. When we are talking about popular culture, we cannot actually bypass the problems of its definition. But in order to understand the problems, we need to understand the definition first. So then again, what then is popular culture after all? First, it is an ideological struggle. Yes, popular culture is an ideological struggle, as you might have understood by now. Why? Because as I told you, imagine one simple audience, X. Now, there are two sections in the audience, X1 and X2. Now, X1 thinks one particular popular cultural element called A is according to their taste. On the other hand, X2, the other section, thinks A is null and void. It is not up to their mark. Does that make the element of popular culture called A popular? Again, we have to come to the question, what is popular? Who thinks a popular is popular? Which section would be granting it enough credibility in order for it to go down into the history of popular culture as something popular? That is point number one. Point number two, and this is the first time we would be talking about a particular author and a critic here, extremely famous, Antonio Gramsci, who talks about compromise equilibrium. Antonio Gramsci was born in 1891, and he talked at length about hegemony and organic intellectualism. It's not actually important for that matter, but just for a passing reference, please know that Antonio Gramsci was a leftist critique of sociology and to a certain extent literature and politics as well. Antonio Gramsci used to believe that there is, in case of popular culture or culture as such, there is always this thing working somehow internecine called compromise equilibrium. What is compromise equilibrium? Again, imagine the previous example that I served you. One popular cultural element, A, one audience and two segments in it, X1 and X2. So X1 and X2 having different tastes. Now, if we imagine that A, the popular cultural element, somehow makes itself to be somehow, again, very important word, somehow acceptable to both X1 and X2. That is called a compromise equilibrium. Both the sides are compromising with the cultural element called A. Now, this compromise, it may come as a surprise to the audience, but let me tell you, this compromise equilibrium happens all the time in our life. I will give you a better example. How about Coke Studio? All of you who are pretty prevalent as netizens over here would be knowing that there is something called Coke Studio, which is basically a revolutionary medium of chamber music as such, and the basic idea of Coke Studio, I think it started from Pakistan, where it says that the folk songs, which are basically beyond the purview of the urban crowd and the people who people like us, who frequent the internet, laptops, social media and such, we don't get to hear such gems of our culture. Now, Coke Studio, what it does is brings those cultures into a musical zone which is more viable to us. I'll explain myself. Western music, jazz, rock, pop, all of these, if somehow can be connected to folk and to be made into a fusion, that would be wonderful. And that's what Coke Studio does very successfully. And because of Coke Studio, so many important in their own field, folk artists and everybody has become household names. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, we are talking about compromise equilibrium. Remember that. This is a compromise. Well, you may argue that the very intricate, original flavor of folk is lost in Coke Studio. On the other hand, you may argue that maybe it is lost, maybe it is not, but in the process, it is also gaining something, which is first, a larger audience, second, a fusion. Folk didn't imagine itself to be in a setting of chamber music where rock and pop will be played, but it is happening. So now the whole aesthetic judgment, whether it's good and bad, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you at this very outset that this whole argument between good and bad, whether it's tasteful or not, is negated when we are talking about ideological struggle and compromise equilibrium, because we are doing a compromise. And when you are doing a compromise, you are taking yourself up from the rather black and white zone of good and bad and be into the gray zone. It is your choice, or rather it is our choice. And the question of good and bad, tasteful or distasteful, is becoming slowly obsolete. So much so about popular culture. Let us talk about class. Now, class, ladies and gentlemen, the first thing that comes to mind is the Marxist theory. Marxist theory, I'm very sure most of the audience would be having somehow or the other, some figments of what it really is, and I wouldn't be boring anybody, but let me just present it very cogently in here, that according to Marxism, the society from ancient times almost is divided into classes. Now, two most recognizable classes, rhetoric-wise, common rhetoric-wise, is bourgeois and proletariat. People who have. Now, these things are not that simple, but for cogency's sake, let's go around it that way. So, let's say bourgeoisie and proletariat. People who's got it, people who doesn't. And now, they are differentiated between themselves through economic distinction. As is quite clear, one person has got some of the money and the other people just do not. So one of the basic problems, or rather the things that has been pointed towards in a critical manner towards Marxist theory, is that first of all, such distinctions between classes are not always made through economics. This is a very prevalent criticism against Marx, that everything that he talks about, or rather the followers, the people who made the Marxist canon as such, it actually puts too much concentration about economics, but there are other elements at play. It's a very controversial manner, and we will not be wasting time on that. And the other criticism leveled against Marxism is the lower and upper class fragmentation. Now, I need to explain this a bit. Marx, in short, imagines that there is a prevalent system. Sorry. There is a prevalent system between lower and upper class. Basically, the lower class will be remaining the lower class, the upper class will be remaining the upper class. The rich will get richer and the poor will get poorer. Now, as it happens in sociology after Marx, and we will be talking about some of them later, it has been noticed, or rather it has been argued, that things are not so rigid. There is a lower class, certainly, but it is also, let's say, it's also layered. There are upper classes within lower classes. Same happens in upper class. There are upper classes, there are upper lower classes and stuff. So, you simply cannot go into a binary. The same thing that I was talking about, let's say, 5 minutes ago, that you cannot go into the binary and say that there is something existing called upper class and lower class, and it's basically divided into good and evil, black and white, and we can understand class through such a prism. That maybe in the present context would be a bit of a mistake. Now, for example, these days, consumerism is one of the greatest metaphors of 21st century. A smartphone that has a genuine access to basically every household. A rich person might use it, a not so rich person, a blue collar worker, a shopkeeper, people whom we generally term as lower class very problematically, they would be also using a smartphone. So again, one piece of technology somehow transcends the barrier of economics that Marx might have imagined. That's one example for you. You may, I mean, if you're smart enough, then you may also clearly dictate that there is a difference between brands, and we shall be talking about it. But before that, let us talk a little about another theorist called Max Weber. Max Weber, or Max Weber, German political theorist and sociological master, 1864 to 1920. Max Weber goes a little ahead of Marx, and he talks about something called status group. What is a status group? Status group is a group that has its existence based on lifestyle and culture. And now you will see how exactly the question of class is coming slowly closer to the question of culture. So again, status group, what is that? Status group is something based on lifestyle and culture, right? It is more of a consciousness. A status group, what it is more of a consciousness than a clearly demarcated economic position. What I mean by that? Imagine it in this way. A status group is a state of mind. One day I feel I'm rich, or I should be rich, or I should at least pose to be rich. What should I do? Just remember my material positions, that is my economic standing, my financial standing in the world, is one of the poor. Yet, I want to pass off as a rich. Remember, a status. So what do? I buy a smartphone. And my friends around me, who belong to the same class, they point at the phone and say that, wow, you have become a rich man now. You see, this is a state of mind. It actually doesn't mean that I am transcending some economic barrier, but it also means that I am projecting myself into the society as someone who does not belong to the same economic group that society otherwise will demarcate me into. You understand this? So that's it basically. So class, according to Weber, is based on ideological roots, manifestations in products, brands, and hence status. So again, to come back to the very question of class being related to popular culture, let us try to objectify our argument a bit. Popular culture and class is intricately related, as you can clearly see. If you take the smartphone as an example of popular culture, again, remember, popular culture doesn't mean it has to be shown in the screen. It doesn't mean it has to be listened to or should be read or something. Popular culture as such, can be anything that is followed in a mass basis. So then again, my recurrent example of a smartphone is just as much popular culture as, say, tigers in the eye. So there, popular culture and class is intrinsically related. Popular culture maintains the status quo, although giving an illusion of individuality. Why? I'll tell you, illusion is the key word in here. Again, you buy the smartphone, you try to pass off to your friends and to the world as a person not belonging to your domain, to the poor house that you live in, but does it really happen? Really is the key word here. Does it really happen? Are you socially or economically transcending your barriers? Not really, but it is giving you an illusion. Point number one. Point number two is or popular culture, thought in that manner, popular culture is a tool of illusion, which basically deludes you into thinking something that you really are not. Or there is also another set of argument that says popular culture can also be a tool of upsetting such a system. It can also be a tool for resisting something. We shall talk about that later. Let us talk about the first part that I was talking about, popular culture and class. Popular culture giving you an illusion and asking you to forget your reality. Now that idea is propounded by one particular sociological school called the Frankfurt School that actually concentrates mostly on production and producers. Let's say in Frankfurt School there are several world famous theorists which mostly happened. This school came into existence in the modernist time, mostly in the 50s and 40s, somewhere in the 60s. Let's say Theodor Adorno, Max Horkheimer, Herbert Marcuse. We are not going into the details. Let's just talk about what really they said. Now, remember, Frankfurt School believed in the existence between high art and low art. What is low art? Low art, according to them, is popular culture. And why popular culture is low art? Because popular culture is something that makes you forget your own reality. For example, Bollywood movies. If there was something called Bollywood movies at the time, or if Frankfurt School had the idea of what Bollywood movies are, they were actually talking about Hollywood movies. But then again, let's take that example. Then you will understand then what Frankfurt School's logic will be is that workers from all classes, basically the lower classes, they would be coming to watch the Bollywood movies. They will forget their own reality while being in the 2.5 hours into the movie theater, and they will cheer to the hero doing unreal things, unrealistic things, and then they will go back to their home and they will remain in the same position forever. That's basically what Frankfurt School said. And so what is high art? If that is low art, then what is high art? Folk culture. Something that is original, something that is not mass-produced, something that is not manufactured in the factory and such. That is basically what Frankfurt School said. So Frankfurt School's acceptance zone-wise, there are so many things. I mean, for example, intellectual author. All right, something that basically teases your brain, something that makes you think, not that mindless, mind-numbing masala movies. Like inspired reader, high art, folk form, these are the acceptance zone. And what is not acceptable, persona non grata for the Frankfurt School is basically working class, cultural product, jazz, blues, and other American music as such. Although this is not the purview of this lecture, but please remember that jazz, blues, pop, these American cultural products are basically the manifestations of a working class scenario. It is meant for the popular, it was widely popular at its time, it's still popular, and people used to listen to it in hordes. But according to Frankfurt School, according to these very intellectual German pundits, these things are illusory and, let's say, desolate in nature. So, now, we proceed towards the criticism of Frankfurt School, because Frankfurt School didn't get away without any criticism. But the first of it was it concentrates mostly on European cultural forms, high art and low art. So high art and low art, this demarcation when it comes to popular culture, as I keep telling you, that this whole demarcation of high art and low art is generally later on problematized by several other schools like the Birmingham School. I will come to that. And the next one is does not recognize the audience anything other than a herd. Why? Because the audience, as I told you, the audience will be coming to the theater, they will be watching the movie, and they will be going back, and they will just forget their reality for 2.5 hours, and that's what Frankfurt School says is deadening, it's mind-numbing, it's mind-killing. So that is precisely what it is not. It is imagining the audience to be, let's say, just passive receptors, which is not the case. Audience thinks and audience connects with the cultural elements in its own way, which is far more complicated than what Frankfurt School might have imagined. That is, which actually brings us to our next point, the Birmingham School. That was the general consensus of the Birmingham School, which was started. One of the stalwarts of it is Richard Hoggart in 1964. But Richard Hoggart is not our purview in here. Our purview is the other person, the Jamaican-born social theorist, extremely famous, called Stuart Hall. Stuart Hall, whose timeline is from 1932 to 2014, died very recently, who wrote about popular arts, encoding and decoding. Now, what is important about Stuart Hall, just in a nutshell, is audience are not like sheep, according to Stuart Hall. They have what is something called as active consumption. When audience is consuming a popular cultural element, doesn't matter from whichever class, they are consuming it actively. What does it mean to be active? Listen to me. Politics is prevalent in all the classes and culture, and they are fragmented from within. Now, as I told you, 1A being received by two sections of the same audience, X1 and X2. Let's say X as a genuine class is a lower class. But then again, there are upper lower classes and lower classes. So upper lower classes would be looking at the Hindi film in a certain manner, and lower classes would be in a certain manner. So as you can see, it is difficult to give an illusion to all the classes. Even if it is an illusion, they are dealing with the illusion with their own life, with their own training, with their own class belonging. So things are not so simple that it is basically an agent of illusion that makes everybody forget everything at the same time and eludes everybody at the same time in exactly the same manner. That's what Stuart Hall means. A pop culture, according to Stuart Hall, that's exactly why popular culture and power struggle is intricately related. Who is reading which culture in what manner? That actually brings up to basically the whole vista of power struggle as such. Now, the last person we would be talking about, who actually went a little ahead of Stuart Hall, although almost at the same time, not ahead, but in a different manner, is Pierre Boulez. Pierre Boulez is, he lived from 1930 to 2002, French philosopher, a very famous book called Distinction, The Logic of Practice. Pierre Boulez, again, somehow went slightly, if I may say so, slightly back towards the classical Marxist definition. How? Well, culture, according to Pierre Boulez, is a capital. What is a cultural capital? Let's say I am an elite of the society. I follow a certain lifestyle. I listen to a certain type of music, let's say jazz. Now, jazz originally was done by working class people who are extremely different from me, who actually don't look like me. They're working class. They were far more beneath me when according to social strata. But it becomes my cultural capital. The rich people listen to jazz. So it doesn't matter however it was born, in whatever scenario it was born, according to me or the people of my class, jazz becomes my status symbol. All right? That becomes not a financial capital, but cultural capital. Then another funny thing happens. It gives birth to hierarchy. Elite people is equal to jazz. Now, if I want to be elite people, what do I have to do? I'll have to imitate the elite people. So what do I have to do? I will have to listen to jazz. Doesn't matter whether I like it or not. Doesn't matter whether I choose to listen to it or not. That is what is called imitation. I'll just give you one simple example. Let's say I want to be a poser. I want to pose as a person I'm really not. What would I do? I will have to imitate somebody whom I perceive to be higher than me, and I will try to mold myself in that person's persona. What happens because of that? What happens, according to Pierre Boulez, is that I lose my originality, and there is a hierarchy, which means that if I am trying to copy the person, suppose I'm successful in copying him, does that mean that I'm being that person? Not really. I'm being an imitator, a cheaper person, not the original one. This is how hierarchy, according to cultural capital, is made in the society and amongst classes. Elites maintain superiority while others try to imitate them. That's what Pierre Boulez said. And there is also a consumption pattern reveal class consciousness. For example, what is consumption pattern? Your taste, your buying cycle, let's say what you are buying, from which brand you are buying. Preference of brands is extremely important. Today, I might be buying a brand that nobody has heard of, and tomorrow I might be buying something from Adidas or Reebok or Nike, which is basically bought by people richer than me. But I want to buy it as well. Why? Because I want to pass off as rich. All right? This is how hierarchy is maintained. I want to be a, let's say, bada admi. And what do I have to be a bada admi? Follow these hierarchical elements. That is basically it. That's what Pierre Boulez says, and that, as you can clearly understand, that also brings popular culture and class, the relation between the two, to a far more problematic zone. Let me tell you, the argument has never ended and it still goes on. But one thing as a conclusion that I would like to say to students is power contestation, where the dominated and dominant vie for supremacy is the thing that is called popular culture. Popular culture is still in the making. The definitions, the demarcations are yet to be made, and that is precisely why, because of its, let's say, its malleable nature, its blobbish nature, that is why power contestation becomes so important, and everybody is vying for supremacy within its domain. So just to summarize whatever we have said till now, we were talking about class in popular culture. Now we disseminated the entire domain, and we talked about what is popular culture, what might be popular culture, and what might be class from different perspectives. We have actually talked about several theorists according to whom popular culture and class both can have a malleable definition as such. We have talked about Marxism. We have talked about post-Marxist arguments like Max Weber. We have talked about at least two philosophical and sociological domains, schools called the Frankfurt School and the Birmingham School. And from them, we have taken at least two very important theorists. One is Stuart Hall and the other one is Pierre Boulez. And what we tried to make out of this is basically popular culture and class. The relation between the two are actually swinging between two domains. They are talking about class being something rigid, and there is the existence between higher and lower class. Somewhere they're talking about popular culture being a tool in order to upset the same class factors. So again, let me just repeat that definitions are not yet made. The elements are still hanging in the air. You can make your own definitions in this condition. Just remember that popular culture is a field of power contestation where the dominated and the dominant vie for supremacy. To have some more information on this, please refer to the e-text and the list that is given in the e-text, the whole bibliography, because whatever I have said and more are all included in the e-text list as such. So please do that, and best of luck.